64K. Where the future is so bright you gotta wear shades.
Thanks for joining, and in this series I'm going to be jumping back and forth between new and old, chronicling the entire SEGA AGES series and its spin-offs. If you like Sega and retro, then welcome to SEGA AGES, Then and Now. Today's episode features SEGA AGES Volume 1 on the Saturn and Virtua Racing on the Switch. So first we'll have a look at the then, and for that I've chosen the original first SEGA AGES release titled SEGA AGES Volume 1 and released on the Sega Saturn in 1997 by Working Designs for North America and Europe. The reason I mention that is that this series officially kicked off in 1996 in Japan and spawned 13 individual releases. But for the rest of the world on the Sega Saturn anyway, we only got this one release comprising of 3 of the most popular single Japanese releases. It's definitely no coincidence that they chose these 3, though all made by Sega's AM2 division, headed up by the 80s golden boy, game designer extraordinaire Yu Suzuki. The 3 games in question are 1985's Space Harrier, 1986's Outrun, and 1987's Afterburner 2. All his most popular 80s arcade games for Western audiences. Also of note is that the music for all 3 games is by Sega music legend Hiroshi Kawaguchi, whose Sega's credit list is filled with endless classics like these and Enduro Racer, Dynamite Ducks, Turbo Outrun, and many more. The Japanese individual releases of these did sport an extra arranged soundtracks for all 3 games, but due to disk space these are not available on this version, which I don't have too much of an issue with as I usually like to listen to the original soundtrack anyway. So option wise there are not a lot here besides extra large sound tests, although they did add extra difficulty levels for Western audiences. So let's start checking out the games, and we'll go in order of their original releases. So first up is 1985's Space Harrier. I played this back in about 86 or 87 in its full sit-down arcade version back then, and was simply amazed at how cool it was. And about that time also I bought the Commodore 64 version, which was converted by Elite, and played the hell out of it. This game is just fun, and it's what made arcades what they were. Simple, addictive gameplay and a thrill ride that was technically way better than you could ever experience at home. If you've never played Space Harrier before, then it's an on-rails 3D, although sprite-based, shoot 'em up with you flying around these fantasy zones, blasting the hell out of everything in your path while dodging the scenery and taking down giant boss characters left, right and center. It's a pure seat-of-your-pants thrill ride through 18 levels and 15 bosses that'll test your reaction and shooter skills big time. That's not to say it's hard. It's actually quite easy to get into, but it goes into overdrive later on. As for the Saturn port, well, it's pretty much arcade perfect in my opinion. I'm sure somebody will find something to nitpick, but for me this is an arcade game in your home. The graphics still hold up extremely well for a game made in 1985, and the music is pure unforgettable Kawaguchi gold. So let's flip over now to 1986's Outrun, a game that almost needs no introduction at this point, with its super smooth driving action and some of the most iconic music in a video game history. It spawned tons of sequels and spin-offs over the years, but besides Outrun Coast to Coast, this is still probably the most iconic in the series. For those unfamiliar, it's a point-to-point on-the-clock racer where driving from one side of the US to the other through tons of changing landscapes, trying to get to the next checkpoint in time, which became a pretty common design in Sega racing games. You aren't racing anybody, but simply the clock, although avoiding civilian cars and watching your speed on those corners is imperative to succeeding to the end. So how does the Saturn version measure up? Again, it's pretty much arcade perfect. Actually, I think it's a little bit faster in the arcade for some reason. I can't tell any other real differences other than that. It's pretty much a flawless port of a Yu Suzuki gem. This game is pure fun, and it's multiple paths to go down, making replaying it a must. It's pumping music, magical sound shower anybody? And the smooth driving action make this still one of my favorite racing games of all time. And last but definitely not the least game in this compilation is Afterburner 2, released in 1987 in the arcades. Any good trip to a proper arcade during this period of time and you'll no doubt have come across this massive sit-down version of this game with its hydraulic seats and pumping music. It just had you hypnotized. Afterburner 2 is an on-rail shooter with you as a fighter pilot taking down waves of bad guys with machine guns and rockets while attempting to avoid their missiles and other incoming fire. It was a fast-paced seat-of-your-pants experience that this port captures perfectly, just like all the others on the list. The speed and graphics are identical, as is the music, although no hydraulic seat. Just like Space Harrier, this game is pure arcade addictiveness that makes you want to just have one more go and see if you can actually make it all the way to the end. Another Sega classic that's been ported to every system under the sun, and luckily most of those ports are pretty decent that I've played anyway. So this original and only release volume in the Sega Ages series on the Saturn, at least in English, may only contain 3 games, but the quality of the ports is top-notch. Practically arcade-perfect versions of 3 of Sega's most iconic arcade games. Unfortunately, copies of this compilation are extremely expensive, so if you don't have deep pockets, you can always try and get the individual Japanese releases, which are a bit cheaper, and they have the bonus of having the arranged soundtracks for each release. This was a great way to showcase Sega's legacy and the Ages series' future potential. Now let's switch gears to the now and see one of Sega's latest releases in the Ages series. This is one of the newest Nintendo Switch Sega Ages releases, Virtua Racing, based on the groundbreaking fully 3D racing arcade game by AM2, released originally in 1992. The reason I chose this as the first of the new Ages releases to cover was because it also was designed by Yu Suzuki, who did all the previous games we just looked at. This game is also part of the Sega Virtua series, which has many entries including Virtua Cop and Virtua Fighter and various others, so I'm hoping we'll also be seeing some of them in the future. And back to Virtua Racing, which is simply a brilliant port. Never has this game looked this good. M2 have masterfully taken this game and given it a silky smooth look and feel. If you've never played it before, then it's very much in line with other Sega races like Daytona USA or Sega Rally, where racing the clock to the next checkpoint is the goal to keep going, and this game has a realistic but still very arcadey feel, which makes it extremely fun to play. You have the choice of 3 diverse courses, each being more difficult than the next. I found all 3 of the courses to be very easy to play, but deceptively difficult to master, which is exactly what this style of game should be. It also sports online racing, so that's also an option and a first for the series. The music is classic Sega arcade madness, and the sound effects are pretty good as well. This game has seen quite a few conversions to Sega home systems over the years, like the Genesis and Mega Drive, the 32X, and the Saturn, which are all for the most part really good, but this is definitely the one to own. With its combination of excellent retro 3D graphics, tight arcade gameplay, and a multitude of options and customization, this is a highly recommended arcade racer for the Switch, and a great entry in Sega's new Ages series. And thanks for joining me, Bastish B at 64K. If you can like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.